Hi, this is Kripa Anand, and welcome to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. Today, we are diving into the data that defines our national prosperity. In May 2026, Canadian businesses are navigating an incredibly complex landscape. From the rapid integration of AI in the workforce to a volatile trade environment that is challenging our traditional global relationships. Joining us today is Dr. Tony Bonen, the Executive Director of Economic Research at Signal49 Research. Tony is one of the country's leading minds on labor market dynamics and macroeconomic forecasting. With a career that spans leadership roles at the Labor Market Information Council at CMHC, Tony now guides a powerhouse team of 100 economists to help Canadians make sense of our most pressing issues. From the ballroom of the House of Guineas in Ireland to the heart of Ottawa's policy circles, Tony is here to provide clarity in uncertain times. So, before further ado, let's welcome this special guest. Tony, welcome to the podcast. Such a pleasure to have you with us.
Hi, Kripa. My pleasure to be here.
Now, Tony, Signal 49 is about to release a major research paper on the impacts of automation on the Canadian labor market, right? And the timing couldn't be more critical. So I'd love for you to take this opportunity and educate our listeners about which Canadian industries are most vulnerable to AI disruption in today's time.
Yeah, it's a obviously hot topic, a big area of concern for businesses here in Canada and really across the world. What we've been trying to wrap our heads around is the way that AI and other automation technologies propagate through the economy and how that will shift labor market dynamics and investment patterns and so on. To your specific question, the easy answer is really, AI is going to be impacting every industry. There's no question about that.
Right.
What we are finding in our analysis is that it's going to be really concentrated, of course, in those sort of professional jobs, those service sector jobs, where you are doing a lot of coding or writing or data analysis. The work that we are going to produce, it's coming out in maybe 5-6 weeks or so, late June, is taking a broader picture, not just of AI, but other automation technologies. And I think this is really important. AI steals the headlines, no doubt about it, right? And it is because it's so cross-cutting, so broad-based. But when we think about some of the other big innovations that are happening in robotics, autonomous vehicles, virtual or augmented reality, and connected devices, it's really the combination of those pieces, those hardware and software pieces combined, where we're expecting quite large impacts across the economy. And when you consider those 5 clusters altogether, including artificial intelligence, the impacts are actually more weighted towards the goods producing and the transportation sector. That's largely because the type of work, the manual work that might be done by a person today could be taken over by autonomous vehicles or robotics. Marry that with AI and some, smart technology to actually adjust and adapt to certain circumstances or an environment, and you can have a really big shift in what's happening in those sectors. The good news on that front, I will say, though, is those sectors where we see the greatest level of exposure across these technology categories are also the ones where we've seen the greatest productivity challenges in the past year. As you surely have heard, we're facing a bit of a productivity challenge here across Canada. And so it's these industries, again, those good producing sectors, mining, oil and gas, agriculture, as well as transportation, warehousing, where we've seen the slowest and in some cases even reductions in the productivity generated in the sectors. So there's actually a real opportunity and upside here to adopting these technologies over the coming 10 to 20 years.
No, definitely. And also, I think understanding that job displacement in the short term is a reality. It helps business owners and, policymakers prioritize the upskilling needed for that long-term stability. And very well articulated, Tony. On that note, let's now explore navigating global trade uncertainty and economic pressure. So for all of our listeners, how should Canadian SMEs prepare for shifting global trade dynamics?
It's a great question and a very difficult one. So I'm glad you posed it. I would say the maybe silver lining that we're facing right now is that the real major shifts in tariff policy coming out of the United States is probably slowed, or at least slowing compared to where it was a year ago. But the damage is done in terms of global trade relations and what you can expect in terms of an open trading world that we've been moving towards for 50 plus years or so. So I think where we need to really be thinking about are where do we have stable relationships? Where do we have other countries, particularly mid and smaller size economies, that are adhering to and have an incentive to adhere to a standard, regularized set of rules and regulations for global trade? It's not just the United States, it's a lot of the big powers around the world are thinking, oh, I can throw my weight around now and I can ship things however I want and use this for some short-term gains. But other middle-sized economies, I mean, Canada is a fairly large one for a middle-sized economy, but we have a real shared incentive to be working together and collaborating. And I think that's very similar to what the Prime Minister has said in some of his recent remarks as well.
No, definitely. I think staying agile and diversifying our trade partnerships, it's no longer just a strategy. It's a necessity for Canadian economic sovereignty in a protectionist era, I'd say. Now, moving ahead, let's look at strengthening trade relationships beyond North America. You touched on this a little bit, but what opportunities do Ireland and the EU offer Canadian SMEs right now, and what should they be mindful about?
Yeah, so we completed a big piece of analysis with the Embassy of Ireland, a very interesting piece of work where we were trying to quantify the trade opportunities between us and Ireland. And there's a big set of opportunities, even though Canadian-Irish trade has really grown a lot, nearly doubling since the introduction of our free trade agreement with the EU. In the goods producing space, there's lots of areas that we can move into. Our report sort of lays those out in some more detail. And on the services side, it's a lot more of what we're already good at, right? Financial services, technology services, there are a lot of trade opportunities there in Ireland, getting a foothold, that sort of gateway into that larger EU market, the largest market in the world, of course.
Mm-hmm.
What we found from that analysis, though, is where Ireland in particular is really excelling and where Canada can learn a little bit is around how we attract investment, making it easy for investors to come here, understand the regulatory landscape.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that really came out clearly through our discussions, we did a number of interviews with business leaders on both sides of the Atlantic. It was very clear that the differentiated regulatory environment we have across provinces was not well understood. People come here and they learn about, as economists will tell you all about, our internal barriers to trade. It's not just a problem domestically, it's something international investors are aware of, they see as a challenge and an extra hurdle to overcome. So that's just one example that we called out in this report where we can do a lot better in terms of connecting with and bringing clarity to sort of that one Canadian economy to investors to allow our economy to grow and likewise to have more opportunities as we go into some of the new markets across the world.
Again, very insightful. And on that note, Tony, I'd like to give a special message to all of our listeners at this point of time, specifically to all the business leaders watching. In 2026, the guiding signal you need is data. Signal49 Research is releasing over 500 reports this year, specifically to help you navigate this trade war era and the AI transition. So, whether you are worried about US tariffs or how to integrate automation in your HR department, Tony's team has the unbiased, rigorous research you need. Visit signal49.ca today to access their regular economic forecasts and their upcoming report on the impacts of automation. Don't make strategic decisions in the dark. Lean on the experts who are literally shaping the conversation from Ottawa to Dublin. Now, and coming back to you now, Tony, leveraging agreements, like you mentioned, it allows Canadian businesses to find stability in established rules-based markets while the North American landscapes, remains in a flux. And on that, let's now explore the evolving nature of work and workforce strategy. So what do you suggest from your extensive experience? How should Canada evolve education and skills for an AI driven workforce? Because earlier learning something was considered a big thing, but right now with AI coming into the picture, that information is available. So what are the skills that people will need to relearn as well?
Yeah, I think the skill landscape will be changing, of course, because of new technology and AI in particular. There is I think, a different set of approaches when you're thinking about retraining your current workforce. People who have been working in a certain way are maybe a little bit skeptical of using some of the new tools that are out there, versus younger people, especially if they're still in secondary or post-secondary school. Thinking about the current workforce, giving people the opportunity to test and try different things is very important. Making sure you are clear on what's allowed and not allowed with that those new tools and technology, I think is going to be really critical. You don't want to have your business put on risk. There are a number of reports of different organizations doing analysis and then coming out and then saying, oh, sorry, this was AI generated, and some of the pieces we can't support or back up. So you need to have really clear rules internally that allow people to have the confidence to test and try things without risking your business. So that's one part. I think there's a lot of self-learning and learning by doing with these new tools. That's part of it. Mm-hmm. On the education for people in post-secondary and secondary schools, I know we have our whole education research team sort of looking into this. It's an evolving landscape. There's lots of different views of it. My personal view, I'll say, is that AI is like a calculator. It's not that you're not going to use it in the real world of work, and it's not that you shouldn't be trained and have it integrated as part of your education plans. There are certain courses or sections of a course, if you like, modules even, where you don't want to use the AI tool, ChatGPT, whatever it might be, and you want people to, try and write things down, show your work, as it were. But equally, you need to have courses and training that say, use these new tools, apply them, and then maybe compare and contrast different results from these and use your critical thinking to see what's coming out of that so that people aren't scared of these tools, especially at an early age. And I think integrating it as a positive thing, as just another tool that we use in our day-to-day is really the framework you need to have going forward.
No, definitely. I think investing in human-centric skills that AI cannot replicate it ensures that our labor market stays resilient even as the technical landscape shifts. Great. Now, Tony, let's look at driving better decisions through shared insights and research. So, I've talked about Signal49, but I'd love for you to now talk about how does Signal49 turn research into practical business decisions? And what's your USP?
It's something we think about all the time. It's something we want to ensure our research speaks to the relevant audiences, business leaders, policy leaders, education leaders, whomever. We really don't want our research to just sit on a shelf or be read by only, two people in, a small academic community or something like that. In the economic space in particular, one of the big challenges is the nature of the data that we have available. So not to scare your listeners, but NAICS codes and NOx codes are the world that we work in. These are how we codify industry and occupations respectively. And when you talk to people in the real business world, these mean nothing. These are not really relevant. They maybe fill this out on a tax form and that's kind of it. Yeah. But being able to take the available statistical categories, the way we are collecting and tracking this data, and then tie that to some of the real practical real world examples is a key thing we do as much as possible. So that report I mentioned with the Embassy of Ireland is a great example where we are using high level international trade data using pretty broad trade and commodity categories, which don't make a lot of sense to individuals on the ground. We had to dig into those categories, understand what was there. And then through our mixed methods, so talking to people, interviews or focus groups or surveys, get a sense of what's actually happening on the ground and draw that line, connect that real world experience to what the data is showing and tell the narrative around that. So what we're trying to do in all of our research, it's not the easiest thing to do because it does take that extra time and effort to listen to people, but that's really our approach to our research generally.
That's amazing. And I'm just so happy seeing the passion that you have for the work that you do, Tori. Is this something that you always wanted to do as a child growing up? Is research and business always something was on your mind, or did you stumble upon it in your career?
Sort of stumbled upon it. So I have a PhD in economics. It's not what I actually tried to apply for. This was my second tier choice. I really wanted to get into sociology, the sociology of economics around the global financial crisis and how trade was happening in financial investors and so on. I was really interested in this. Got on the short list and get into my preferred program at Northwestern, unfortunately, and it worked out brilliantly. I ended up getting into an economics program in New York at the New School for Social Research.
Uh-huh.
And that allowed me to do a whole bunch of really quantitative research and analysis. And I love data. So that worked out brilliantly. So I like to say that I'm a bit of an accidental economist that way. If I can share, I mean, I really had this moment when I realized how few people were going to read my academic work when I was doing my PhD. And so I'm very, very happy to be at a place where we do really applied research that speaks to a broader audience, still has that rigor and that solid foundation that you would find in academia, but trying to translate it in a way that can have a real world impact. So that's very exciting for me.
Beautiful. So much more power to you, and keep doing the amazing work that you do. I'm loving this conversation, Tony, and definitely we'd love for you to be back, hopefully for an in-person episode the next time where, we can dive into deeper discussions. But for now, before we let you go, if there's one final piece of advice, that you have for our listeners today, specifically someone who is overwhelmed by AI and, trade uncertainty, if you could whisper one thing into their ear, what would you say and why?
I would have two very different answers to those two pieces. On AI, I would say, don't sweat it. Try things out. Right now, a lot of these new tools are dirt cheap. Buy a license for yourself or for your employees and let them test around and play around. And maybe something will come out of that. That trial and error is really how we're going to see these productivity gains. Don't be scared. Nobody really knows what's going to happen over the long term here, but that's not a reason not to try it out. On the trade uncertainty side, I maybe have less reassuring words other than to say I think the big shocks in terms of tariffs ratcheting up and going down and so on, I think are past us. I'm fairly optimistic at the upcoming CUSMA, the U.S. Canada-Mexico trade agreement will go reasonably smoothly. I'm not expecting big shifts or changes there, but hard to say really. But we are going through something of a change in global dynamics in terms of trade relationships there. So that one's a bit harder to give some support to feeling optimistic, other than to say I think we have a really strong Canadian community wanting to work together and trying to find that stability for everybody. So I think there's a lot to work on from that basis.
I think your answer was balanced and, a great reminder that while headlines are volatile, the underlying data provides a clear path forward, right? Tony, it was such a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, that was Dr. Tony Bonen from Signal49 Research, a masterclass in labor market dynamics, the reality of the Canada-US trade war, and how to find growth in the European market in 2026. To all the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and visit CanadianSME.ca for more such resources. To learn more about how we are supporting the ecosystem, please visit the Canadian SME Small Business Foundation at smbfoundation.ca. And lastly, a very special thank you to our partners, UPS and ADP, our HR partner, for their ongoing commitment to empowering SMBs across Canada. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Kripa Anand signing off.